With the demise of Showtime, which is how I'm going to close the show, it may get easier for some of this, and I'll tell you why. If it's true that most of the boxing broadcast now is going to reside on DAZN or ESPN, which is what it looks like going forward for the foreseeable future, it should be easy to at least find all the events. ESPN does a pretty good job of listing out all the different fights that are going to be there, except for the ones that are just kind of throwaway fights. So ESPN's pretty straight. DAZN is the one that has an issue with giving a very full list card of who's all fighting on the deck and where they're from, like where they're fighting. They don't do a good job of this one. And I'm not a fan of DAZN getting that platform. I'm not a fan of Showtime leaving the business, just like I wasn't a fan of HBO leaving the business. That said, I think Showtime started to decline. And I'll be honest, when they stopped, at least highlighting the ring girls every now and then. I mean, you don't have to focus on them all the time, but in the old days, you would at least zoom out so we can see the ring girl. Give them a spotlight every now and then, give them a chance to wave the camera every now and then, give us a chance to see that. They don't do that anymore. They didn't, they stopped doing that. HBO would do it all the time. And then HBO would do a good job of not excessively focusing on the corner. I think it did a good job when it made sense. Like sometimes on Showtime, they would focus on the corner and they're not saying anything. That's a waste of people's time. You might as well focus on the ring girl. If they're not talking, focus when it makes sense. Showtime seemed to suck at that one. So I'm frustrated that they're leaving the business because I don't want to see more decline of boxing availability. At the same time, I think Showtime was purposely sabotaging the business by not focusing on the things that made boxing fun to watch in the first place. And I do think that the paydays played a factor. I do think that there were some excessive paydays. No, we can't blame Floyd Mayweather for this because the point is different. We're not talking about people shouldn't get paid or shouldn't get paid millions. Is the fight worth that money? Like a lot of fighters, like a Crawford of the world, were asking for, Crawford was asking for 3-4 million bottom side guarantees to fight Amir Khan. Like, you got to put it in perspective. It depends on the quality of the fight. If the quality of the fight's not there, I'm pretty sure you got a guaranteed minimum $3 million against Cain Velasquez. It has to go to the quality of the fight. And that's where we went south, is where we opened the door for the fighter to dictate, this is just what I'm going to get paid or whatever, or they sit on the sidelines. And I blame the promoters for signing those contracts thinking they're going to get return off of it when the fight doesn't make any sense. Well, then you got two sides of the fight, right? You got promoter A and promoter B. They can't work together because both their guys are trying to get big paydays for a fight that really ain't worth that. It's not going to return that amount of money, not in this current era. And it's not about pay-per-view. It's just the fight's not worth it. That's the bottom line. So you can't, and then Golovkin and Canelo early on DAZN, they were just giving it away, $9.99. You can get Golovkin fights and Canelo fights and Joshua fights and Klitschko fight. Like, it was crazy. But, these guys, they started bleeding themselves dry. So my point is, I think Showtime didn't help the matter because they were all too happy to say, okay, we'll just throw money at it, hope we're going to entice people back to the sport. You're not going to entice people back to boxing by avoiding the things that entice people in the key demographic to begin with. The reason we had people in the key demographic is because of what? When people go to the events, they treat it like an event, right? You're maybe you drink beer, maybe you hang out, you're having fun at the event, which is why they were doing it at casinos, because then maybe they'll stop by the casino and hit the tables or something, which they would do. But also, the ring girls played a big factor in the draw of boxing, seeing that, because your key demographic is what? 18 to 34 male, has historically been this. Boxing's key demographic now, I don't even know, has it shifted away from that key? I would suspect it hasn't. It would have to be the same. Maybe it shifted a little bit on the younger side now, which is not good. With the misfits of the world and the YouTubers of the world and all these other freak shows, maybe it's skewed younger, and that's the reason why you've lost the plot, because you're hosting all these fights that don't cater and events that don't cater to your key demographic, but also your camera work and everything, avoiding the ring girls, doing everything you can to make them demons is killing the business and just turning everything into, now it's a obvious cash grab. You're just turning everything into a pay-per-view just because you have to pay these guys. And you're, like if I were these promoters, to me, first of all, I would never do contracts where I'm giving them a guaranteed downside. Or if I do a guaranteed downside, it's going to be a very low guaranteed downside. It's enough for you to feed your family, basically. You got to figure something else out with your crew. And to me, I would contract the crew. I would never hire a full-time crew. I would say, look, you're going to have contract crew so that you minimize the cost, right? but I'll give you a baseline that's enough to feed your family, 100K or something. Enough to feed your family, enough to keep a roof over your head, take your kids and do what you got to do there. But when it's time to fight here, dude, the fight has to be worth the money. It has to be worth the money, and that's based on draw. It's not based on titles, it's based on draw. Draw is largely based on venue, but it's also based on you, the personality of the fighter. How much money can you draw? How much money did you draw in your last fight? And you have to draw up some of those fans. You got to go out there and find them. You have to do the work to go out and do it. Yes, I'm a promoter and I'll help you in terms of marketing materials and television. I'm talking, you need to hit up your schools, you need to hit up colleges, you need to hit up, banks or whatever you do. Find people and spread the word. Get your name out there in the public. Remember, some of the older fighters, they were out there, right? Muhammad Ali was out there. It wasn't just his promoter. He was out himself promoting. He was out there cutting interviews, but he was also out going to places. And I think a lot of these fighters don't want to self-promote. They expect the promoter to do all the work. The promoter can't sell you. You have to sell yourself, which means you have to have a gimmick. You have to have something that puts you above and beyond. And if you don't have that, you got to figure out how to get it. And I think that's where a lot of today's fighters fall short. I was actually interacting. There's a guy, he's on YouTube, Ice John Scully. And he does events and he meets with different boxers of the past. And he gets interviews sometimes, and he'll get autographs sometimes, and he'll auction off materials to help fighters of the past. And we were talking about Mitch Blood Green. Mitch Blood Green is one of my favorite fighters because it's not about, again, the in-ring, but I'll get there. Mitch Blood Green was one of the first to have a gimmick. Like, he actually had something to appeal to people, and he was corny and he's crazy, but he had the throwback look of the time, greasy hair and the shades and chains, like whatever, and the long sedans. He just had a gimmick, and he would go on, he would cut promos. We're talking WWF style promos. And people look at it now like, oh, it's corny. You got to understand, at the time, that's how you would get over. That's how you get over. Riddick Bowe tossing shit in the trash. Like, this is how you would get over. You get over with a gimmick. You have a gimmick of some kind that puts you over. Chris Eubank was a master at this. Nigel Benn, I would argue, had a gimmick. Like, gimmicks is how you got over at the time. And the decline of gimmicks, if you notice, every fighter, for the most part, they're all doing the same thing and they're all generic. Anthony Joshua has a gimmick. Great. Deontay Wilder has a gimmick. Great. Tyson Fury has a gimmick. Great. Outside of the ones I named, look at boring ass Frank Sanchez. He has nothing. He's just a guy. He's just there. Luis Ortiz is just there. Chris Arreola is a fan favorite, essentially, but he's just there. But he's just there, right? The gimmicks were why people were able to draw money to the events. Why you were able to draw fan interest, casual fan interest, to say, okay, that's interesting. This guy, he's telling a story, or he looks like he's a tough dude, or he looks like he's a badass, or he looks like he's about to kill somebody, right? And they tell the story, and then the fan gets interested, and they pay the money to dial in or come to the event or go to a theater and watch it. That's what we've lost. Now you get guys cutting interviews, and I know you've seen it, and they're like, well, I like to thank my promoter. I'm happy to be here. And we're gonna put on a good show. And we nobody wants to see that shit like that. Nobody wants to see. And I get it. Not everybody knows how to talk straight, and certainly our education system has failed people. I understand that, but goddamn, take some classes, do something. And so in the wrestling business, that's referred to kind of like the producer, kind of a producer role or some role that's designed to help craft and build that and build who you are. Who are you? Who are you to the fans, and create the gimmick and put it out there. And I know some in UFC have tried to do it. Some succeeded, like Conor McGregor. Some failed. But I think it's critical. And I believe the lack of that, and Showtime basically killing the business by not spotlighting their key demographic and the things that they like, is what's really killing boxing. We're turning everything into a sideshow also, but we're making it generic. We're making it try to appeal to everybody, even the people who would never watch it. That's the problem. You should not appeal to people who would never watch your product. I have the same issue with porn, if you be honest here, right? It's like you're trying to appeal to people who would never watch this garbage. That's the wrong answer. Same with movies, same with TV shows. Everything is now generic because they're trying to not offend people, or they're trying to or appeal to a low common denominator. And boxing's gone that way, and it's sad. I don't like to see that. Anyway, I'm done with my rant. I will check in with you guys after the fights, and I'll check in with the results, especially with the women's action. I'm really intrigued on that one.